Welcome. I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment with your thoughts and reactions as you listen. Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. A cool breeze in the fall gave Alex Parker chills as he walked alone through the dark streets of Pine Falls. An air of sadness hung heavy over the sad occasion. It had been 11 years since the horrible murder that had torn his family apart. Thin wisps of fog moved between the quiet homes like ghosts from a bad night's sleep. To speed up his walk to the old station, Alex pulled his coat closer and turned up his collar. He knew that Sheriff Bartlett would work late tonight, as he always does. The kind man helped Alex after that terrible crime and has become like a father to him since then. As Alex got closer, the sheriff's office gave off a creepy glow. As he got closer to the window, the strange sight inside made him gasp. Bartlett sat alone in front of the glass and scribbled quickly in his notebook. Halley's Comet was shining outside the window. But it was the sheriff's crazy eyes that scared Alex the most. They were glowing in a strange way, like the man was possessed. Alex hit the glass, but Bartlett didn't move because he was too busy writing quickly. The boy went around and tentatively knocked on the front door, which was creaky. "What about the sheriff?" "Hello, it's me. Are you okay?" The speed with which Bartlett jumped up from his desk was unreal. He held his heaving notebook tight to his chest. He yelled in a crazy voice, "The stars are falling, and we are all going to die." Alex stepped back in fear as the sheriff charged at him, his eyes still shining with that strange light. "You need to leave town, kid. Don't wait. Do it now." An awful scream rang down the street at that very moment, followed by the sounds of a fight. Bartlett sped past Alex and out of the station while babbling to himself. When the boy ran after him, he slid to a stop in shock. In the weird green light of the Comet, Mrs. Johnson from next door was viciously beating Mr. Wilson, who lives next door. But it was the violent changes that were happening to their bodies that scared Alex the most. Their muscles were writhing and their faces were warped, as if an alien were changing their bodies from the inside. At that very moment, Mrs. Johnson spun around and hit Bartlett with unnatural force, knocking him off balance. Her bright eyes were fixed on Alex, and she let out a roar that didn't sound like it came from a human mouth. Wilson jumped up next to her. His badly hurt body was already healing too quickly. The terrible change they went through was complete. As the shocked sheriff got to his feet, Alex yelled, "Something is wrong with them. We need to get inside." It was too late, though. The scary forms came down on them with an unnaturally fast speed under that sickly green light. On that terrible night, Alex turned around and ran for his life as chaos broke out behind him. The nightmare came back to Pine Falls again. Alex slammed the front door shut and bolted it behind him. He felt his heart racing as loud noises and screams came from outside. He leaned against the wood and gasped for air as scary pictures ran through his mind. What was going on with Sheriff Bartlett and the others? A loud thud was heard against the door, and then there was heavy scraping as something started to claw at the outside. Alex jumped back and let out a shocked cry as the wood began to buckle under the immense pressure. He climbed deeper into the house, desperately looking for a safer place to stand. At that very moment, a loud voice came from upstairs. "Who is that?" "You can shoot me." Alex stopped moving as his mind raced as he recognized the loud sound. "Sheriff, it's me, Alex," he yelled up the stairs. "Please, you have to help me bar the doors. Something's very wrong out there." Bartlett stumbled down the stairs with a shotgun tightly held in his strong hands. His heavy steps shook the stairs. Alex was glad to see that the sheriff's eyes were back to normal. He asked in a stern voice, "Boy, what the hell is going on out there?" Before Alex could say anything, the front door was smashed by another powerful blow. Bartlett turned around and with a loud blast, blew the lock apart. As the weak wall started to fall apart, they quickly pulled an armchair behind it. "There's no time, Sheriff." Alex pushed again and again. "We have to find others and barricade the whole street before those things break through." Bartlett paused, and his worn-out face showed that he was upset. He woke up when he heard another set of pained wails. "Okay, son, show the way. In order to get guns and supplies, I will go to the station," he roared with new determination. Bartlett kicked out a back window and pushed Alex through it before running off into the night. Alex ran from house to house, banging on doors and windows as his fear grew. Most of the homes were dark and empty. The people who lived there had probably lost their minds in the chaos outside. When he got to the Johnson house, he saw Elise desperately blocking the doors, while her younger brother Joel huddled inside. "Thank God you're both okay." Alex gasped and nearly passed out. "Sheriff Bartlett is at the station getting more help. As many people as we can must leave before those monsters break in." Elise gave an angry nod and lifted Joel up onto her shoulders with a steely determination. The ragtag group fought their way through the city, stopping to save lives and strengthen their defenses as they went. By the time they got back together at the station, only 12 people were still not sick from the virus. Bartlett had stuffed the building full of all the useful guns, knives, and tools. Survivors worked through the night to strengthen walls and board up windows. In the distance, a scary sound could be heard. In the foggy streets of Pine Falls, a chorus of strange howls and primal cries could be heard. The deadly hunt had begun. The days turned into a never-ending nightmare as the changed people from the town attacked the station over and over again. Crazy, violent creatures that Alex used to know as friends and neighbors threw themselves against the barriers because they were hungry and wanted to kill. Behind the weak defenses, food and water became scarce, and there was less and less chance of being saved or escaping. Alex, the others, and I took turns watching and jumping at every scrabbling hit or grunting howl. Frustrations grew as people got tired. Through a crack in the boards, Alex saw movement outside one night. A huge figure was hitting the wall with its misshapen head, ripping skin from its mangled face. Alex was horrified when he saw that it was Mr. Wilson. He was still healing, but the terrible damage he had taken earlier had left him only half. It looked like this plague changed both the body and the mind. He told the group about his observation in an awkward way, which sent a chill through the packed room. "How long before we also lose it?" Elise whispered it. A few days later, one of the guys died from an infection that had spread to his body. While the others burned in a circle around his body, Sheriff Bartlett stared straight into the flames. He hummed, "We're not going to last much longer, cooped up in here. It might be time to split up and try to distract them in groups." When she heard this, Elise lost it. "You want us to run away and be killed one by one in the woods. Together, we have a better chance." A fight broke out between them, and only Joel's frightened cries stopped it. "Get your act together," Alex yelled. "We shouldn't fight with each other." But as the sheriff and Elise looked at each other with a knife, he wondered how long they could stay together as the darkness around their minds grew. The attacks got even scarier that night. Frenetic screams and pounding could be heard throughout the station as a never-ending crowd pushed against the walls outside. Screams and gurgles of fear showed that the changed had turned on each other out of madness. Alex held Joel close while he cried and prayed that the walls would hold. But when the sun finally came up, there was a strange silence over the wrecked town. Even the toughest survivors looked like they were about to give up in the still gray light. Alex thought that the people stuck inside the station's crumbling defenses were just starting to go crazy. The last morning started out with a silence that was scarier than the bloodiest battle. Only a few people were still inside the station, their eyes empty as they looked over the food that was being stored. Elise stayed by Joel's bedside and didn't say a word to Alex or the others. Alex sat alone, his mind running as he tried to figure out what had happened in Pine Falls. There was something more than just chance about the comet's appearance. His parents had given him a crazy warning about stars falling from the sky the night they were killed. This made him jump. Alex was determined to find answers, So he snuck out of the station at dawn with the few useful things that were still there. Even though he wanted to comfort Elise by putting his hand on her shoulder, she jerked away without looking at him. She was too upset and tired to say anything else. Alex went back the way he came to his childhood home on the edge of town, staying low to avoid being seen. The growing path looked eerily clean compared to the death and destruction around it. When he got close to the open, an odd light came through the trees in front of him. Alex was shocked when he saw the source in the sky above the house. Halley's Comet, which was twice as big as it had been a few days before. Its sickly green glow seemed to give off an otherworldly air. It took a while for the real horror to hit him. At the bottom of the porch stairs, his parents were lying flat and twisted, just like the last time he saw them many years ago. Now, though, as the comet's light covered their bodies, they moved in a sick, spine-chilling way. Alex realized they were changing again and felt fear start to rise. "Why?" He screamed so badly at the sky that it didn't care. "What did you do to us?" At that very moment, the resurrected horrors inside the house sensed him and slammed into view, their mouths clenched with an unnatural hunger. Alex raised his homemade weapon to face the monsters that had killed his family. He did this with tears in his eyes. Instead, he ran up to the monsters that used to be his mother and father and threw his arms around them. He begged, "Please forgive me. I'm really sorry." X hugged the only family he had left and apologized to the dead through tears. He wouldn't let go, even as their claws cut him. There was a horrible shaking that came from the twisted shaped centers, like something was trying to come out. With a horrifying shriek, their bodies were blasted apart, leaving behind a mantis-like thing from a nightmare. As the horror loomed over Alex, he fell back, woozy from shock and blood loss. It was ready to kill him. At that very moment, a loud blast tore through the air and killed the thing. As more aliens swarmed from the broken tree line, Elise and Sheriff Bartlett crashed through the trees with their guns drawn. They fought their way to Alex's side by killing monster after monster as a group. As Halley's Comet buzzed above in a harmful way, Alex finally got it. These were not neighbors or friends. They were host bodies for an alien attack planned by the Comet. He now knew how to do away with the threat for good. Alex led the attackers deep into the woods on a chase with the help of Elise and Bartlett. The focused light from the Comet lured them in. In a huge explosion, he set off the orbital mines that Bartlett had placed earlier, destroying both Halley's Comet and the signal from the aliens in charge. Pine Fall's twisted bodies fell apart all around them, like marionettes whose cords had been cut. Finally at peace, as dawn broke over the quiet town, Alex found comfort in the arms of his tired but alive friends. The worst part was finally over. What was left behind, though, was silence. But darker secrets still echoed of the real horrors that lay beyond the stars. The morning sun filtered through the trees surrounding Sunnyside Kindergarten, its warm rays doing little to alleviate the unease stirring in Mrs. Wilson's stomach. As she led her class in finger painting, strange sounds drifted from the woods that made her pause. But she dismissed them, not wanting to worry the children. All seemed normal until Frank radioed in, his gruff voice laced with concern. Reports of a mysterious illness spreading through town were coming in fast. The school was going into immediate lockdown. Mrs. Wilson calmly explained the situation to the confused 5-year-olds. Behind her smile, fear gnawed at her gut. She helped the children clean up just as the automated doors clicked shut and the power flickered out. In the dim emergency lights, Frank paced the halls, flashlight in hand. Probably just a bug going around. I'm sure they'll have it sorted soon. He reassured a crying girl, though he didn't believe his own words. Strange moans now echoed from the forest. Mrs. Wilson gathered the children for games by candlelight, shooting worried glances at the barred windows. Was that movement she saw outside? No, just a trick of the flickering flame. All pretenses of calm shattered when Tommy started seizing on the floor. His eyes rolled back as red foam bubbled from his lips. The other children screamed and scrambled away in terror. Before Mrs. Wilson could react, the classroom door shuddered under heavy pounding. Shadowy figures slammed against the small window, their features twisted with madness. More small bodies collapsed around her, transforming into rabid monsters. Frank burst in and slammed the door shut, shoving a table against it as claws raked the other side. "We're trapped," he panted, scanning for another way out. But all exits led outside where the infected roamed. The barricade shuddered under the onslaught. Mrs. Wilson clutched the few remaining children, their cries mingling with the moans of the diseased. As the table legs started to crack, Frank realized with dread they were trapped in a nightmare with no waking from this horror. The pounding on the door grew louder, the table legs splintering under the force. Frank grabbed a chair, bracing it alongside for support. "We need to get to the basement. There might be another way out," he said to Mrs. Wilson. She nodded, clutching two sobbing children and motioning the others to follow. As they fled down the hall, a crash resounded behind them. Frank slammed the basement door shut and dragged over a cabinet. "Hurry! Find anything useful!" he shouted, shoving against the growing pressure as infected slammed against the other side. The children helped Mrs. Wilson search shelves, coming up with a first aid kit, flashlight, and cans of food. A small window offered no escape, barred from the outside. "Over here!" cried a boy, pointing to a trapdoor in the floor. Frank heaved it open, revealing a dark earthen hole. "Go, go! Go, go!" he yelled, the cabinet groaning under the onslaught. Mrs. Wilson lowered the children down one by one as Frank held the door. She was last to descend the ladder, just as the cabinet burst apart. Infected tumbled through in a frenzied mass. Frank dropped and slammed the trapdoor shut above him. Clawing fingers raked through the slats and moans echoed in the cramped space. The beam of a flashlight revealed a low tunnel stretching ahead. "Stay close and be very quiet," Mrs. Wilson whispered, taking the lead with the light. The group crawled on hands and knees, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Emerging into a clearing, they found the school surrounded by infected milling about. The woods offered their only route to safety. "We'll sneak around the edge and make a run for the trees," said Frank. "Wait for my signal." He peered out, timing the movements. At his cue, the group darted across the open ground, dodging grasping hands. The woods enveloped them in shadowy refuge. They followed a deer trail as the last light faded. Mrs. Wilson tried comforting a crying toddler, but her own nerves were frayed. In the darkness, a shape loomed ahead. Frank shone the light to find a man, face gaunt and eyes glazed. He lurched towards them, letting out an inhuman groan. Frank swung the flashlight, caving in his skull with a sickening crack. "Keep moving," he said grimly, taking the lead with renewed urgency. The children huddled close to Mrs. Wilson, jumping at every snap twig. Was that a moan in the distance or the wind in the trees? Stumbling in the blackness, Frank halted. "There's a building up ahead. Maybe we can hole up for the night." A lone farmhouse sat dark and silent at the edge of the woods. Frank picked the lock and they slipped inside, barricading the door behind them. Exhausted, the children fell into fitful sleep as Mrs. Wilson kept watch. But no rest came, for dangers lurked in the shadows without and within. Luke peered over the edge of the balcony, down the seemingly endless shaft at the tower's core. His breath fogged in the chill air as he scanned the empty floors stretching below, now as devoid of life as the city streets far below. 3 months, they had held this place, salvaging what supplies they could reach and barring the doors to the outside. 3 months of slowly whittling away under the constant dread, waiting for the end to find them at last. How many more could they lose before giving up hope entirely? A noise roused him from his thoughts. Jenna approached with flashlight in hand, her worn doctor's coat rustling. Any sign of them? Luke shook his head. All clear from here. How are the others holding up? As well as can be expected. Jenna sighed. Mia had nightmares again. The children sense it even if we try to shield them. Guilt twisted in his gut at the mention of Mia, one of the few survivors of Luke's doomed efforts to save his family that fateful night. We'll get through this. We have to. But as the days passed into an endless cycle of rationing supplies and barring doors, Luke found solace in fewer and fewer places. Each creak in the night dragged him back to that night, helpless, watching the shadows take his wife and daughter one by one. Luke, Jenna's voice cut through the memory. You should get some rest. I'll take over watch for a few hours. He nodded gratefully and headed inside. The large atrium they had made their home echoed with the sounds of a few survivors trying to carry on as normal. Children played while their parents looked on, finding fleeting moments of joy where they could. Luke paused, taking it all in. They had survived this long through strength of will alone. But for how much longer? That night, a scream jolted him awake. Grabbing his flashlight, Luke raced down the hallway with Jenna on his heels. They burst into the dormitory to find Mia thrashing in her sleep, eyes wide with terror. Mia, wake up. Luke shook her gently. You're safe. It was just a nightmare. She awoke with a gasp, clinging to him. Exchanging a worried glance, Luke and Jenna did a sweep of the area but found nothing amiss. He tried to reassure Mia it was only a dream, though an ominous feeling lingered in the pit of his stomach. In the morning, Luke called a meeting of the survivors. Maya reported hearing strange noises last night. I want people to stay in groups and be extra vigilant until we know what's going on. You think it found a way in? Asked Thomas, a former construction worker. Luke hesitated. I don't know, but I'm not taking any chances. Over the next few days, unease grew as more strange sounds echoed through the empty halls at night. Then, one morning, they discovered Beth missing from her bed. A thorough search turned up no sign of her, as if she had vanished into thin air. That evening, Luke paced restlessly while the others ate a meager dinner in tense silence. Jenna watched him with concern. We'll figure this out. Try to get some rest. But sleep would not come, as images of his family's fate haunted him. When more noises echoed down the hallway, Luke grabbed his flashlight and followed, pulse racing. He tracked the sounds up several flights of stairs to the abandoned medical floors, long since scoured of supplies. Rounding a corner, Luke froze in horror. On the floor lay Beth's remains, torn and bloody. Crouched over the mangled corpse was a hulking, nightmarish shape, features barely human, as it tore into the flesh with feral hunger. It turned at the sound, eyes glowing an eerie yellow in the darkness. With an inhuman snarl, it lunged straight at Luke. He swung the flashlight desperately, connecting with a sickening crunch. As the creature reeled back, Luke glimpsed a face twisted beyond recognition before it retreated into the shadows. Shaking, he fled back to the others. Whatever was hunting them had finally emerged from the darkness, and it was far worse than any nightmare they could have imagined. The next morning, a pall hung over the survivors as Luke recounted his discovery to the group. Jenna examined Beth's remains but found no clues to the attacker's nature or origin. All Luke could recall was a twisted, inhuman face in the darkness. As the others debated their next move, Jenna took Luke aside. We need to search that floor you found her on. There may be something we're missing. Against his better judgment, Luke agreed to let her take a look. Armed with flashlights, they cautiously made their way up the abandoned stairwell. The medical floors had long been stripped bare, leaving only dust and shadows. Jenna paused, shining her light over strange markings on the wall. These look like restraints. Luke's unease grew as they pushed on, finding more signs of the floor's past use. Gurneys lay abandoned, some still bearing faded stains. A chill went through him as he realized this place may have been used to contain those infected in the early days of the outbreak. Deeper in, they entered a large ward that had clearly served as a makeshift hospital. Rusted beds and medical equipment were scattered about. But it was the walls that gave Luke pause, covered from floor to ceiling in strange symbols and writings he couldn't decipher. Jenna examined the markings more closely. These matched descriptions from reports of the first infections. Patients experiencing delirium and psychosis as the disease took hold. She pointed to a section, the writing taking on a disturbing pattern. It seems this virus, or whatever it was, didn't just kill. It mutated the brain in ways we're only beginning to understand. A noise in the next room jolted them into action. Flashlights raised. They slowly pushed the door open to find a large laboratory. Terminals and monitors dark and dead. Cabinets held rows of containers marked with biohazard symbols, their contents long since evaporated or escaped. In the back, a hulking shape shifted in the shadows. Luke raised his flashlight to get a better look, freezing in horror. A gaunt, emaciated figure crouched against the wall, its limbs bent at unnatural angles beneath tattered medical garb. As the light fell upon its face, Luke recoiled in disgust. Fused flesh and bone had reformed the features into a feral visage, eyes glowing with an alien intelligence. It stared back as if recognizing something within its shattered mind. With a guttural snarl, it tensed to spring. Run! Luke shoved Jenna ahead of him as the creature lunged, barely missing its mangled claws. They raced through the ward, the thing bounding after them on all fours, gaining with terrifying speed. Ahead, the stairwell door came into view. If only they could make it in time. As they burst onto the landing, Luke risked a glance back to see it mere feet behind, jaws gaping to reveal rows of serrated teeth. In a desperate move, he shoved Jenna through the door, then turned to face the monster, raising his flashlight like a club. It barreled straight into the blow with a sickening crunch, reeling back with a shriek. Luke slammed the heavy door just as gnashing teeth snapped mere inches from his face. Heart pounding, he leaned against it, meeting Jenna's wide eyes. We need to barricade this. Now. Working frantically, they pushed a storage cabinet across the entrance as claws raked and shrieked from the other side. Only when it grew eerily silent did Luke allow himself to breathe, the reality of their discovery sinking in. Back in the relative safety of their floor, Luke and Jenna recounted all they had learned to the group. A shocked silence fell over the survivors as the implications set in. They were not the first to seek refuge in this place. Thomas was the first to find his voice. So whatever happened to those patients is now happening to us. We're trapped in here with those things. Panic rose as the group erupted in a frenzy of questions, fear, and anger. Luke raised his hands, struggling to be heard over the chaos. We don't know how many there are or what they want. But staying here isn't an option anymore. We need to barricade the lower floors, salvage what we can, and make our way down. It's the only chance we have. In the tense days that followed, they worked to fortify their position floor by floor. But supplies were dwindling, and unease grew as unexplained sounds continued to echo through the tower at night. One evening, as Luke kept watch, Jenna approached with a ration of food. You should eat. We'll get through this if we stick together. He took the offering with a grateful nod, finding solace in her calm reassurance. But would it be enough, with the shadows closing in and their fate still uncertain? Only time would tell if they could survive the darkness within the tower's walls and find a way out before it consumed them all.